That boy, he's a devil. When he be a man, why he jest and make things whirl round ya. Reckon we'll take back seat when early raisin cane. He had unharnessed the mare and with his back bent was pushing the buggy into the carriage house. A pistol and him no bigger than a minute. A small stone whizzed past Peter's head and clattered on the stable. He hastily dropped all occupation and struck a curious attitude. His right knee was almost up to his chin, and his arms were wreathed protectingly about his head. He had not looked in the direction from which the stone had come, but he had begun immediately to yell, "You Jim, quit, quit, I tell you, Jim. Watch out, you gwine break something, Jim." "Yah!" taunted the boy, as with the speed and ease of a light cavalryman he manoeuvred in the distance. "Yah! Told on me, did you? Told on me, hey? There, how do you like it?" The missiles resounded against the stable. "Watch out, Jim, you gwine break something, Jim. I tell ya, quit your foolishness, Jim. Oh, watch out, boy, aye." There was a crash with diabolic ingenuity. One of the Jimmy's pebbles had entered the carriage house and had landed among a row of carriage lamps. On a shelf creating havoc which was apparently beyond all reason of physical law, it seemed to Jimmy that the racket of falling glass could have been heard in an adjacent county. Peter was a prophet who, after persecution, was suffered to recall everything to the mind of the persecutor. "There, knew it. Now I reckon you quit. He jest dut the lamp, for lang's sake. Oh, now your pop jest break every bone in your body." Now, in the doorway of the kitchen, the cook appeared with a startled face. Jimmy's father and mother came suddenly out on the front veranda. "What was that noise?" called the doctor. Peter went forward to explain. "Jim, he was heaving rocks at me, doctor, and along come rock 'em, go blam into the lamps and jest skitter 'em to bits and declare." Jimmy, half blinded with emotion, was nevertheless aware of a lightning glance from his father, a glance which cowed and frightened him to the ends of his toes. He heard the steady but deadly tones of his father in a fury. "Go into the house and wait until I come." Bowed in anguish, the boy moved across the lawn and up the steps. His mother was standing on the veranda, still gazing toward the stable. He loitered in the faint hope that she might take small pity on his state, but she could have heeded him no less if he had been invisible. He entered the house. When the doctor returned from his investigation of the harm done by Jimmy's hand, Mrs. Trescott looked at him anxiously, for she knew that he was concealing some volcanic impulses. "Well?" she asked. "It isn't the lamps," he said at first. He seated himself on the rail. "I don't know what we are going to do with that boy. He isn't so much the lamps, it is the other things. He was throwing stones at Peter because Peter told him about the revolver, and what are we going to do with him?" "I'm sure I don't know," replied the mother. "We've tried almost everything, of course, much of it pure animal spirits. Jimmy is not naturally vicious." "Oh, I know," interrupted the doctor impatiently. "Do you suppose when the stones were singing about Peter's ears he cared whether they were flung by a boy who was naturally vicious or a boy who was not? The question might interest him afterward, but at the time he was mainly occupied in dodging these effects of pure animal spirits. Don't be too hard on the boy, Ned. There's lots of time yet. He's so young, yet I believe he can be naughtiness from the wretched Dowsel boy. That Dowsel boy, he's simply awful." Then, with true motherly instinct, to shift the blame from her own boy's shoulders, she proceeded to sketch the character of the Dowsel boy in lines that would have made that talented young vagabond stare. It was not admittedly her feeling that the doctor's attention should be diverted from the main issue, and his indignation divided among the camps, but presently the doctor felt himself burn with a wrath for the Dowsel boy. "Why don't you keep Jimmy away from him?" he demanded. "Jimmy had no business consorting with abandoned little predestined jailbirds like him. If I catch him on the place, I'll box his ears." "It is simply impossible unless we kept Jimmy shut up all the time," said Mrs. Trescott. "I can't watch him every minute of the day, and the moment my back is turned, he's off. I should think those Dowsel people would hire somebody to bring up their children for them," said the doctor. "They don't seem to know how to do it themselves." Presently, you would have thought the talk that one Willie Dalzell had been throwing stones at Peter Washington because Peter Washington had told Dr. Trescott that Willie Dalzell had come into possession of a revolver. In the meantime, Jimmy had gone into the house to await the coming of his father. He was in a rebellious mood. He had not intended to destroy the carriage lamps. He had been merely hurling stones at a creature whose perfidy deserved such action, and the hitting of the lamps had been merely another move of the great conspirator Fate to force one Jimmy Trescott into dark and troublous ways. The boy was beginning to find the world a bitter place. He couldn't win appreciation for a single virtue. He could only achieve quick, rigorous punishment for his misdemeanors. Everything was an enemy. Now there were the silly old lamps. What were they doing up on the shelf anyhow? It would have been just as easy for them at the time to have been in some other place. But no, there they had been, like the crowd that is passing under the wall when the mason, for the first time in 20 years, lets fall a brick. Furthermore, the flight of that stone had been perfectly unreasonable. It had been a sort of freak in physical law. Jimmy understood that he might have thrown stones from the same fatal spot for an hour without hurting a single lamp. He was a victim, that was it. Fate had conspired with the detail of his environment to simply hound him into a grave or into a cell. But who would understand? Who would understand? And here the boy turned his mental glance in every direction and found nothing but what was to him the black of the cruel ignorance. Very well, some day they would. From somewhere out in the street he heard a peculiar whistle of 2 notes. It was the common signal of the boys of the neighborhood, and judging from the direction of the sound, it was apparently intended to summon him. He moved immediately to one of the windows of the sitting room. It opened upon a part of the grounds remote from the stables and cut off from the veranda by a wing. He perceived Willie Dalzell loitering in the street. Jimmy whistled the signal after having pushed up the window sash some inches. He saw the Dalzell boy turn and regard him. He then called several other boys. They stood in a group and gestured. These gestures plainly said, "Come out, we've got something on the hand." Jimmy sadly shook his head. But they did not go away. They held a long consultation. Presently Jimmy saw the intrepid Dalzell boy climb the fence and begin to creep amongst the shrubbery, in elaborate imitation of an Indian scout. In time he arrived under Jimmy's window, and raised his face to whisper, "Come on out, we're going on a bear hunt." A bear hunt? Of course, Jimmy knew it would not be a real bear hunt, but would be a sort of carouse of pretension, and big talking, and preposterous lying and valour, wherein each boy would strive to have himself called Kit Carson by the others. He was profoundly affected. However, the parental word was upon him, and he could not move. "No," he answered, "I can't. I've got to stay in." "Are you a prisoner?" demanded the Dalzell boy eagerly.